Okay. This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air. And I hope I have your name right. Is it Junaid Ahmed?
Junaid Ahmed, like, yes, Junaid.
Yeah.
Junaid
Okay,
like
I got it
lemonade.
right. So, we thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm a strong believer in home studios. I'm actually in my own.
Nice.
uh, yeah, so yeah, I think we'll have a good conversation about how to actually go about doing what you're really good at. Before we jump into that, you'll see that we're on Newsly. It's an iOS app. It's an Android app. We are a featured podcast. This podcast will be on Newsly within an hour. We'd like people to check out coupon code GHOST. And you get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening. So we'll start
Nice. I
off
love
that
that.
you have a website. We're going to encourage people. We're encourage people to go to your website, homestudiomastery.com. That will be clickable after we're done. And so, yeah, we always ask our listeners to check out the links that we provide, and that'll be up the whole show. So, I guess the
Nice.
first question, I've seen that you've been for 3 decades involved in video production, multiple types of systems. What made you want to do a home studio? Were you not happy with the studios that were available? You just wanted to have the convenience or power to have your own.
Well, the thing is, thank you so much for bringing me on. First of all, Phantom Electric Gear. I don't even know. We haven't we talked about exchanging names in conversations, but um, what's cool is what inspired me was I've been recording videos, all around the world, and just creating straight up content using different types of um, cameras over the past few decades. But then in the last decade, I was shooting documentaries, short films, and stuff like that. Not in the studio, but all mostly outdoors, telling stories and stuff like that. But it wasn't until 2018 when I was sharing my experience with video production on my smartphone and taking it to the next level. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, would you mind talking about your mobile video production experience at this local LinkedIn event?" I was like, "Hey, absolutely, I'd love to." And what happened after that is what totally changed how I looked at things, because people were like, "This is pretty amazing." And what I wanted to do is I wanted to now create a course around how to use your smartphone for video production. But when I came around to shooting the videos in my home studio or in my home office or in my basement, all I saw was yellow walls, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't look as beautiful as I wanted to. So I put
Mhm.
a pause on it. I I also didn't have the experience of talking in front of the camera because I had been behind the camera. I was the camera guy. I was a grip. I'm producing. I'm doing all sorts of things as opposed to being the actor, being the talent in front of the camera. Now my podcast journey is what enabled me to become the storyteller. I've interviewed over 400 guests on my own podcast, Hacks and Hobbies, and that's what enabled me to become the storyteller that I wasn't. And with the pandemic, I was like, okay, now I have some time to spend at my home. I can set up the stage just the way I want it, and that's where the home studio mastery, and that's how I came to build my home studio.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a familiar story because I'm a keyboardist, and you can see all my synthesizers behind me.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I decided I had bands meant for many years, and then everybody stopped showing up, right? So I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, I want to keep on writing, so I built my own studio. It was all focused on music,
Yeah.
and then a podcaster in 2016, contacted me and said, "Hey, I see all this music," and he said, "I want to interview." I didn't even know what a podcast was.
Sure. Yeah.
So he started interviewing me, and we liked it after the first episode, and we actually did a combined show with this guy from New
Mm-hmm.
York named Rock Tunes for like 4 months. And
Nice.
then I went and jumped on a platform called Spearman, and you just use your phone. It was all audio.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I ended up on Anchor, and then I end up here. And by 2020, I went from audio to video, and then I got better microphones like this thing here,
Mm-hmm.
using a boom, and all the stuff you see behind me is a lot
Yeah.
of tools for music. But then I had mixers, I had all this stuff. I said, well, I can use these for the audio. But then
Mm-hmm.
I had to go through the whole process. But I've gone through 750 interviews, 350 with musicians all over the world.
Beautiful.
And, from being a keyboardist where I wasn't the lead singer,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like behind the camera. I
Yeah.
was a keyboardist. And if you see
Yeah.
keyboardists in bands, most of the time they're not singing, they're just playing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it became a whole nother thing. So it seems like we had a parallel experience because I was
Very
like,
parallel. Yeah.
yeah, a different type of situation. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you get the confidence eventually after you do that many episodes
Yes, you do.
to launch. Were you audio first or video?
I was audio first. I was audio only, mainly because I was like, I didn't want to. I just wanted to remove all the friction. Like my first season that you can still go and listen to was all recorded in my car while I'm driving back and forth from work,
Yeah,
documenting my beekeeping journey. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. I'm getting to create content. I had no audience reaching out to me and telling me, hey, how cool this was because I wasn't really marketing. It didn't click till I actually was like, okay, let me see. I'm sure there's other people who like to talk to themselves. Let me bring them on. And my first friend that I brought on was uh, my good friend who had a band with. So I sang in a band like 20 years ago, and so I brought my lead guitarist. I'm like, hey, come on, let's have a conversation on the podcast over here. And the
that's
rest is,
fun. I think
mm-hmm.
that's really cool because talk. I initially started I was just talking about music, but then I
Mm-hmm.
had this other guy that I was talking to. He was a DJ, and
Yeah,
I'm a big music fan. Being a musician, we tend to be fans, right? We're
of
fans of
course. Yeah.
so we just talked about all types of genres for months, and then
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Hey, why don't you talk to those guys, all those cats on Instagram? Because Instagram still is like where there's tons of musicians."
Mm.
And we just pitched a couple examples of what we had done, and said, "Hey, do you want to do a behind the music interview?"
Yeah.
And the thing that I was amazed is I was able to get musicians all over the world without
Mm.
talking to their agent, without talking to the A&R, without talking to their manager, and get them to come on to a show with me and talk.
Yeah.
And it's been like that. I've hardly ever had to deal with managers, and that's been really cool to actually directly talk to an artist. And
Yeah.
so that was something that I just didn't even think would happen until I said, "Well, I'll just ask and see if they do it."
Right. Exactly.
And sometimes you just have to ask people, and you just might assume they'll say no, but then you're like, "Wow, they're not saying no."
They're not saying no, right? Because as musicians, and as artists, we are still deep in our bones have that same spirit that all musicians do. We just want to connect. We just want to have fun. We want to have, you just want to create music. We want to create original art. And so when you see an artist and when you connect with an artist, I'm like, oh my God, you sang, you were in a band, you had a band, you had that kind of experience. They're like, oh my God, they know my journey. I definitely want to come and talk to them.
Yeah, it's just been fun. And then, over the last couple of years, podcasting has changed where I was very narrow. All I was
Hmm.
talking to was independent and emerging bands, no matter what the genre, but that's what the
Yeah.
focus was. Then it's opened up where like I'm talking to you. Like I've been
Hmm.
talking to shamans, CEOs, life coaches,
Hmm.
film directors, models, painters. It's like it's opened up to become like just entertainment. So it's, I still have 70% are musicians, but
Yeah.
it's opened up to 30%. I've opened up to all these other areas
Hmm.
that, and then people say, well, why would I come on? Well, I've interviewed like 15 CEOs.
Yeah.
So then I can point out to a CEO that I have done it, and they're like, oh, okay, I'll come on.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's expanding. It's like the idea of in my music, I have this idea called expansive sound. So what's that mean?
Hmm.
I'm going to go into every genre. If I
Hmm.
feel like doing jazz, I'm going to do jazz. If I want to do outlaw country, I'll do outlaw country because I'm a musician. So it's like I just don't care. I like to play everything, and
Yeah.
so I like to talk to everybody. And people that thought I was going to be electronic and
Hmm.
only talk to them, but I've talked to classical musicians, punk rockers, heavy metal, any genre.
Nice.
And so by not being so narrow, I've been able to be somewhat successful. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of cool in this market, the way the world is that you can have something which kind of open. But I know
Yeah.
you're more focused on studios.
Yes. So I like what you said. you have now the capability to go wider, but you started out narrow. Now they say you gotta when you're starting out, you want to be narrow as much as possible because that enables you to become the expert in that space. Right? There's nobody else creating content like you are, speaking with the type of people that you are, because as you build up the numbers with those specific content, now you can come back and say, hey, I've done this many interviews with this many people. I have a huge audience, and I can, now you're introducing a whole new genre of people to the crowd that's been listening to your podcast.
And I think all the listeners I have are tend to be creative people. They're
Mm-hmm.
actors, they're musicians, they're film directors. Because musicians and film directors, we kind of go hand in hand because we got to do
Yeah,
videos,
you
and
gotta do it. Is
you have to present, and so you tend to work with visual artists
mm-hmm.
because you have to think about your presentation. So I think a lot of my audience is very much into home studios.
Mm-hmm.
Musicians, are the whole idea of like a bedroom producer. That
Yes,
that's like, ever since COVID, that's like the big thing, like because
that's the big
everybody's either
yeah.
basement or bedroom, right? um, but
Just find a
yeah,
room, put a camera in it, make some music.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what we have to do. We had, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to keep on working, you still were in your DAW working
Yeah,
on the record till you could send it to an engineer, and
right.
so you had to figure out how to do as much as you could
Yeah.
instead to keep on going. So I think it's a really uh, interesting journey. So like I'd like to get to your journey when you decided you wanted to build that studio, and
Mm-hmm.
you're focusing on visual
Yes.
and video work. What I know you probably had to come up with green screens and all kinds of the tech, the computers. So what was like the first couple of steps that you had to actually engineer a room and or think it out or think out
Well,
the space?
great questions, man. So the first thing that I did is like, okay, I already have this room, this space, and this is an actual room that I've actually built out, right? So I've got wooden walls on this side, I've got nice color
That's
bookshelves
cool.
and whatnot. And so initially, my desk was back there, and my background had these two windows. And whenever it was daytime, you'd see the windows in the background, and I'm like, okay, this is not a good look at all. And
Hmm.
so I focused on lights. I focused on the audio first of all. Well, before even the lights, I was focusing on the audio. It's like, okay, make sure the audio is on point because I'm doing an audio podcast. But with the COVID hitting, and I saw Pat Flynn, and I don't know if any of you know who Pat Flynn is, but he's been podcasting for about a decade now. He was like,
Hmm.
hey, we're all stuck at home. I'm going to do a daily live stream on YouTube. So every single day he's on YouTube for 2 hours talking about his journey being an entrepreneur, being a podcaster, launching courses, etc., etc. And then it was 2 weeks later that he posted on his blog, "Hey, this is equipment that I'm using in my studio."
Oh, cool. So you
So I was
got to
like,
see what
"Okay,
you're doing.
this is pretty cool." Yeah. So you got kind of like the cheat sheet. So I go through this list and I'm like, "Wait, I have 90% of the gear that this guy's talking about.
Well, that's
Let me
cool.
put it all together," right? So I started to bring the cameras, bring the lights in, and it was a journey over time. Like initially, I just had a single light. I was using my overhead lights. I didn't have these fancy LED lights, and over time, I just kept adding and adding to it. But the first thing that I recommend all of my clients is, let's figure out where your home studio is going to live. Let's figure out where the walls are, where the windows are. Are they going to be in your shot? Are you going to be, step away from it? Now, a lot of people have asked me, hey, can we use a green screen? Like, yes, you can, but you'll need to make sure that you light that green screen properly. Otherwise, we're going to have some artifacts flying around.
Yeah, it's true. Also, you got to have a computer with a CPU or GPU that can process the green screen and be on your system on your distributing system at the same time. Because
Exactly.
I played with it for a while, and I
Mm-hmm.
got a ThinkPad. And I thought it was powerful enough,
Yeah.
and it was having problems.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm not going to use it because it was detrimental to the production.
To the
But
production. Yeah.
yeah, but then I moved to one of my music mics. This is one of my recording mics, which
Mm-hmm.
is I said, what? And I like a boom. So I like
Yeah.
the stand. So
Yeah.
I'm standing at a stand-up desk
Sure.
with a boom,
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually have a mixer. So I'm actually using a mixer that's connected to my laptop, so I can control your level and my level and all this other stuff. But
Gotcha.
that initially I was just on a cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
probably like in the car, and I did some in parking lots and cars and like.
Yeah.
And so, but one other thing I had done as a podcast, I was an Uber for
Mm-hmm.
like 5 years. And I really think being an Uber driver, being a taxi driver, like a barbershop person,
Mm-hmm.
you get to talk to people.
So many people. Yeah.
Yeah, every airport ride. Well, in Uber, you kind of get measured. You get the 5 star if you have a decent
Decent
conversation. So,
conversation. Yeah.
so we kind of got encouraged to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good, like building. Before I was even heavy into podcasting, just
Yeah.
being in an Uber and having the airport ride for like 2 hours with somebody and having to talk to them,
Yeah.
off the cuff, that really prepared me for a lot of what I do.
No, I totally agree. And like your Uber journey, in 2014, I did Lyft driving in Denver. I did it for 9 months. Did over 500 rides. Not that much. I mean, it was part-time working as a driver, and then I would have these conversations, and it opened up my confidence level as well. Being able to strike a conversation with a random person it was really hard for me initially, but now it's a lot easier because I understand where they're coming from, having that empathy, having the curiosity to ask, hey, what do you do, and what makes what motivates you on a daily basis, or what inspires you to do what you do.
Yeah, I mean it's all kind of a progression because eventually, I ended up doing like 2 bedroom producer festivals where I
Mm-hmm.
brought on my podcast. This was a big thing that it took a lot of work, but I ended up taking the people I interviewed, the musicians, and then doing
Mm-hmm.
a festival, like 3-day festival. And I had
Nice.
to sound check every band. Every band had different interfaces. Every band had different capabilities or different cameras, and I had talked to each band and kind of sound check them all.
Yeah.
And so that in itself helped like increase my capabilities because I got to check out people who were using different systems
Yeah.
and seeing if I could actually get it to all work as a seamless event.
No, that's really cool. Absolutely.
So have you ever done like something like that was beyond what you thought you were going to do with your studio? Like in terms of like initial, like what was your initial goal to use your studio, and then has it become more than what you thought you could do? Have you
Oh,
gone,
100%.
yeah, done things that you didn't
100%. So
expect?
I again, I designed the studio. I set up the studio so I can have these live conversations. I can have these Zoom calls with my friends, with my entrepreneur groups and the masterminds that I'm in. But then the main goal why I actually set everything up was to be able to create this video course, to
Hmm.
teach people how to use the smartphone to build, create video content. Now, the reason I went down that path is because I'm a huge videographer using all different types of cameras, but the iPhone makes it so much easier. In 2014,
Yeah.
my cousin and I, we went off-roading, and I used my iPhone 5s to shoot a video of us going off-roading. We're going up the hill, down the hill, climbing these crazy, getting different views, and I edited that video on my phone. I posted it on YouTube, and then it was shared in the forum where these similar car guys hung out. My video shot up to 35,000 views, and then that
Wow.
in itself was like, okay, there's something here. People want to learn. People want to understand what it takes to create this type of stuff. So that's where the journey started, and where it ended up being is now my friends and the other masterminds that I was in, they're like, dude, you should be teaching how to set up studios to people because you've done that transformation from where you were to where you are now. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like a pretty awesome idea. So I've been blessed to be able to do that and help others create the studios of their dreams. It's been pretty
That
cool.
that's something I haven't really thought about because I focused like on just like interviewing bands and maybe doing concerts
Yeah,
and doing what I'm doing right now. But I never thought to like
yeah.
maybe do a master class because I actually use this studio behind me to actually, for the last since 2016 to do albums. And I'm working with
Wow.
collaborations with like producers in Japan, people
Yeah.
in Australia, and I've been able to kind of do a lot of work at home without going into the traditional studio system, which a lot of people felt like you had to do that. And now there's a lot of equipment that you can have at home where you can pretty much do 99% of the production, until you get to the final mastering. And I do even a lot of mastering, but it just became something that's I think the idea of being in a master class, I never thought of that because I was just so focused on I'm on still in the craft of doing what I do. Never thought to think about teaching. So now actually talking to you, that makes me think, man, that's something I didn't think I probably wanted to do, and you're making me want to do it. Oh, now you dropped off.
That's one of the
Yeah.
effects that I have on people. Talking to them about what I've been through and what I've gone through, and it kind of clicks in people's mind. Wait, I've done all of that. I can totally teach people how to set up a sound studio. Or I can totally teach people how to produce an album and have a masterclass on it. And if you take a look at masterclass.com, this site came out around like a year before the pandemic hit, and there's
Mhm.
only like handful of people teaching classes on here. But now, dude, there's so many people
That's
on
right.
there. It's mind blowing. People are teaching all sorts of things, and it's a it's a really beautiful place. I mean, they've also dropped their price in half. Used to be 180 bucks a year. Now it's 90 bucks a year. So
Wow.
it's been a pretty amazing journey for sure to watch them grow as well.
And so that's actually to join as a teacher, to be able to join
No,
this.
masterclass is for very specific people. So people on the stature of Samuel L. Jackson,
Oh
or
yeah, happy life.
we got who's that? Christina Aguilera. There's Usher teaching music. There's Bill, the science guy, talking about science and all the
Mm.
cool things. We have Neil deGrasse Tyson in there talking about the universe and quantum mechanics and everything. So, like, all these top actors and all these top people in their industries are the ones that are in there teaching masterclass. You can even learn cooking, so many different types of dishes from there,
Mm.
because Gordon Ramsay is there teaching cooking and how to run a restaurant. Like, there's all these top celebrities essentially that are teaching their master classes.
Well, that's cool. I could probably just do my podcast on a different level, have a different tier of them that go
Absolutely.
into that initially on my YouTube channel and just build an audience there and see what happens from there.
Oh, 100%. And masterclass.com is not the only platform. There's so many other platforms where you can publish your course on and have
Mhm.
people buy it, right? So
Well,
there's teachable.com, there's Kajabi, there's like a lot of different platforms where you can actually launch your entire course and have people buy into it. And it's almost like you're creating a Patreon where they get
oh,
exclusive content.
that's
But
awesome.
now this is something where you're walking them step by step. Hey, how do you do this specific thing? So
Yeah, a how-to type of thing. Because like
exactly.
you see a lot of in our field, like I'm a modular synthesis.
Hmm.
It means I build sound from the waveform
Oh my
on
God,
old
that's
analog synths.
that's
And
so sexy, man.
well, it's not. It's actually kind of against the grain because most producers today are in the box
Hmm.
in a digital audio workstation taking
Yeah,
clip something
yeah.
that somebody already did. I'm taking a Moog and I'm taking a sine wave and a square wave and I'm building a tone from scratch using
Wow.
subtractive synthesis from Dr. Robert Moog or using Don Buchla's additive
Hmm.
synthesis theory. So I'm actually a technical guy that
Yeah, no.
builds stuff. And so it's a different type of mindset. Not every kid who's a producer today wants to do that because, well,
Yeah.
it's going to take me 2 days to build my tone, to build my
Mm-hmm.
kick drum. I'm building kicks and toms and snares from scratch. I'm not finding somebody else that did it
Right.
and then clipping it or sampling it. I'm actually creating it. So I always tell a lot of young people is like, if you do it that way, you're not going to get copyright strikes
No.
because I'm
Because you're
actually
building it from scratch. Yeah.
I'm building everything from scratch. I'm building all my tones. I'm a player, so I'm a keyboardist, so I write all my parts.
Wow,
So
that's beautiful.
with original stuff, and so a lot of people say, "What am I going to do if I can't get these samples cleared?"
Yeah.
Well, learn subtractive synthesis, so that you can just build it yourself. And so
Yeah.
I'm the kind of guys that go, I'm the uncle guy, Uncle Electric, and I teach you how to actually do it yourself, so you don't have to
No.
pay that splice and pay that Fruity Loop. But yeah,
No, that's so cool. I mean, that's totally a course that you can, so you can have different levels of the courses too, right? You can have a lower tier, just a beginner. Hey, this is how I set up a drum loop, and then you got like 4 modules or four lessons, and then for like $20 somebody can pay and learn. Hey, this is how I can do it. This is software that um, Dr. Electric is using, and then they're now creating their own beats. So now you've got the intro, then you got the intermediate, you got the
like
advanced.
a
So you can do
masterpiece.
all sorts of levels. There's
Yeah.
so much there, man.
I did notice because I've been talking to life coaches, and life
Mm-hmm.
coaches will have like a book, but the book doesn't really make them the money.
Mm-mm.
What happens is they go to a symposium, they go to a convention, and they have services or classes, or they'll have advanced life coaches. I've seen, like, I had this one from Hawaii. He actually
Yeah.
has like a campus in Hawaii, and he has people go to his campus, and then they
Mm-hmm.
stay there for weeks, and then they
Yep.
pay the fee to be there for
Yep.
weeks. And I've seen that model seems to be kind of big, where people will go and create these kind of places to go
You
and
know,
taught.
you're so right. And the funny thing is, this model has been tested, tried, and has been around for over 150 years. It's called the college system.
Yeah, yeah. Well, these are people that
Right. So
are
these are
outside
now, you're now creating a private college where you're
of
teaching very specific art, very specific techniques and very specific things. And people, once you have a believer, you're all in. Like people who have been following Tony Robbins, they'll go to his Unleash the Power Within program, which is like a 4-day retreat, and
Mhm.
he's like totally changing your mindset. And like there's so many different programs, and there's an abundance of this kind of stuff, because if you look at how many people are actually consuming the content versus creating, it's a very small percentage, like literally a very small percentage. If you just take a look at YouTube, about 700 hours of videos are uploaded every minute. Do you know how
Mhm.
many actual creators are on YouTube? 37 million channels, 4 billion plus views, because 4 billion plus people are consuming content created by 37 million people, which
Yeah,
means
it's
that we are in that echelon of the people who are actually creating the
creator.
content. So we are, it's pretty amazing to know what we are capable of, and what kind of power we have in creating the future generations.
Well, I always thought it was interesting. That's why I focus on like singer songwriters. Like
Mm-hmm.
initially, I didn't focus on like just an artist at different levels. Like, so you can have an artist that's like a singer, but they never write their own stuff.
Right.
You have vocalists and you have studio musicians that don't write their own material.
Yeah.
I've always been very influenced by singer songwriters or people who write original material.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been focused, and then they branched into creators, painters, people who are inventors, like anybody who's like a creative mind that creating
Excuse me.
something and not actually building off of something. Everybody builds off of something, but these people have
Right.
original thoughts
Yeah.
and actually want to have a vision. And I've always been more impressed with a musician like a Bob Dylan
Yeah.
than somebody who's just like back in the 50s, just singing the songs from Tin Pan Alley. People were
Right.
singing other people's songs, but
They're doing the cover
Bob,
songs. Yeah.
yeah, Bob wrote his own. And then the birth of the singer songwriter, along with the Beatles, that you could come out and not be Neil Diamond, right? You didn't have to be, from that point, you didn't have
Mm,
to be one of those writers. The writer could be the singer, and
yeah.
that was like unknown before. That
Yeah.
was a big shift. And so the fact that you can be an original thinker and actually be out there and actually speaking about your
Hmm.
original content, I think it's kind of like is a revolutionary idea because people didn't really think they had the right to,
Right.
you
No,
but
you're
now,
so right. You're so right. Now we have such a small, such liberty and such capability of doing all of those things without having to worry about anything else. Like with the introduction of the smartphones, you have the entire power of the entire. I mean, there's a lot more that you can do now than say 20 years ago.
oh yeah, like my iPhone, the newest model is as powerful as any laptop like 5 years ago, probably more powerful. Like my new
Exactly.
iPhone that I just picked up is more powerful than any PC 5 years ago. Actually has more
Exactly.
capability I can go live anywhere I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can just go on Instagram, go live, right? And
Yes.
I could be in the middle of the woods and go live. I could be,
Yep.
at a concert and go live. You can go anywhere, and
Yeah.
that becomes like the gatekeepers. It's like in the music industry when you have all these musicians have home studios, they can go directly to Spotify. They can go
Yeah.
directly to iTunes. They go directly to the market
100%.
and then go on TikTok, make a video, get buzz, and didn't go through the studio gate.
No,
They
no need
they
to
get a
anymore.
million views and boom, the studio calls you.
Yeah. It's like you no longer need to fake it to make it. It's kind of like what Kevin Hart did for himself.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've read his book. You can't make this shit up. He talks about how he wanted to do stand up comedy, so he learned how to do stand up comedy. He would go every weekend, and when he started making big, Hollywood called up like, "Hey, would you like to do a movie?" So he did a movie, and he said, "I want to do all my dialogue." They're like, "All right, sure thing." So he did all his dialogue. That movie did pretty good. They're like, "Okay, we want you to come do this TV show." Now they shot entire first season. It never got to air, and he was just sitting on his butt waiting. He's like, "I don't want to wait anymore. I'm just gonna go out and do my thing." So he's like, he put the band together, like, "Let's go do the shows." So he started
Mhm.
going, city to city and start showing up. And at one show, he met Dane Cook. Now Dane Cook was like, "Hey, what are you doing collecting emails from these people?" He's like, "Well, every time I show up in the city, I just send an email and these people show up because they want to watch my show." He's like, "Oh crap, that's awesome." So now Kevin Hart and team started collecting emails. He made himself so big that Hollywood came back knocking at his door. Every single movie that Kevin Hart's in, he does his own dialogue.
That's like a core thing about like the singer songwriter movement is that people kind of pushed and said I
Yeah.
want to do it. Like even if you think about it, like Prince, I don't know if everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows the story. When he was 17 years old, did his first record.
Mm.
He came to Warner Brothers and he had all these demos, and they came to him and said, "Guess what? You 17-year-old young Prince, we're going to get Maurice White from Earth, Wind, and Fire to produce your first record. And you should be so happy." And Prince said, "Guess what? I'm producing the whole thing myself. I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
all the songs. I'm playing all the instruments. I don't need
Yeah.
the studio
Yeah.
people. I don't need the production people. I'm doing the whole thing." And they're like, "Are
Yeah.
you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Maurice White is a Grammy Award winning producer. You're
Yeah.
17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you the right to think that you should do it?" And I said, "Because I can't." And he had the confidence that now a lot of kids today have that same confidence. They're willing to
Mm.
go and tell
Yeah.
the big labels, "I'm doing it my way, and that's the way it's going to be." And
Yeah.
I think that's really good for the industry because
It is.
if you think about it, what would have happened if Maurice White produced the first Prince album? You wouldn't have the Minneapolis sound. He would have
Mm.
sounded like Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yes. So true. You're gonna bring your flavor, your baggage on every new music that you create. So, and Prince didn't want that baggage, right? He's like, I want my own sound. I've got it already. It's all right here already. Don't need nobody else. I love that.
Yeah, that's the thing is because the industry a lot of times, if you go, everyone wants to get signed, but the thing about it, what they do is they want to just clone what's successful.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever's in the top 20, your label will try you get you to replicate what's in the top 20, and that necessarily isn't you.
No.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's very radical when you get like a Freddie Mercury that pushes for Bohemian Rhapsody when the label said, "There's no way we're putting out a song that long." There's no way. Even the Eagles with Hotel California, they were an
Mm-hmm.
establishment that was doing very well. And then they showed the label that song, and they're like, that doesn't follow the radio play rule. And they said, we don't care, just put it out. So a lot of times, like artists have to push against the wall because
Yeah.
the industry just wants you to be a certain thing. And they get really crazy because even a TikTok person that blows up,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they want to make 100 clones or 1,000 clones of that one thing.
Yeah.
And they never
It's
think
not gonna last.
that maybe the original stuff is what you really should be going for.
Exactly. It's
But
it's the yeah, it's the original story that people connect with. It's like, who's this person that I'm listening to? Is he a clone or is he an original? Is he authentic? And that's what they're attracted to.
that's why I think if you think about the studio systems, like you guys are pulling from TikTok, and what is there? That is a whole universe of original content.
Original content,
And then
yes.
you continue to want to do what you've been doing for the last 50, 100 years. Let's just clone that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that antithetical to what you just saw?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, but people can't stop being who they are. But
No.
but I think that's one of the cool things about building home studio is that you get to do, like I went and learned how to be an engineer
Mm-hmm.
just because I was like, I don't want to pay thousands of dollars to these engineers. And being a synthesist, I was kind of halfway there
Mm-hmm.
because I'm the type of musician that I actually build from the sound wave, right? So I
Yeah.
know what I want it to sound like. And I spent all this time on a Moog making
Mm-hmm.
it sound that way. So it's not that hard for me to go to
The
the next
Moog
step.
modular, right?
Yeah. And it's not that hard for me to go from the next step. Like if you're a musician, you're not that detailed, but like for a synthesist, we're dealing with the character of the sound. So it's not a big leap for me to want to make sure that I maintain that sound when it gets engineered
Yeah.
because I'm kind of a control freak. So if if I give something I spent 2 days building and I know what I want it to sound like, and I give it to an engineer and he makes it sound like the top 20. Well, I didn't want it to sound like the top 20. I want it to sound like what I just did. And so that's a different type of mindset. And not every artist is ready to do that. Not every artist
Yeah.
can kind of control their sound. They need somebody else to do it. But it's a different type of mindset. So I think it's the same thing when you would build your own studio versus going to a established studio. You have your own vision, right? You had a vision
Yeah.
and you want to be able to control that vision in your own environment.
And not just a vision, right? It's also your personality exudes. Like anytime you see that video, I'm like, okay, that's this guy's studio, or that's that guy's studio, because that the space that you created, it's it exudes your
Your vibe.
personality,
Yeah, your vibe. Yeah,
your vibe.
everybody's got their own vibe. A lot of us musicians,
Yeah,
we kind of believe in the idea like the muse,
the
like a poet.
music.
Like most
Yeah.
musicians are poets first,
Mm-hmm.
and then a lot of times I've talked to musicians, so many interviews, and they'll say, you know what? Sometimes it's just like I'm just at my instrument and something just comes to me. Now, a lot of them will admit that it's a combination of everything you ever learned how to play,
Mm-hmm.
all the people that you grew up liking.
Yeah.
Just it kind of subconsciously come out when you play. Like if you're a jazz musician and you listen to Coltrane, somehow he'll throw a
Mm-hmm.
show tune into the line because it was in his head, right? He'll
Yep.
throw a classical line from some like symphony, and it will just throw
Mm-hmm.
it in the line because music is basically based on everything you learn. You learn all the scales, you learn all the
Yeah.
technical stuff, and then when you get to be a really good master, is that you actually know how to merge all your influences kind of in
Mm-hmm.
real time.
That's
And then
right.
you kind of let it go and let the universe kind of tell you, like, it's point in times. Like, I don't even know why I did it, but I did it because I have muscle memory. I've been playing for years. You have a certain level of capability because you practiced, but then
Exactly.
you're also influenced by everybody you ever heard. And I
Right.
would think like in photography, you probably, have people that you looked at or film directors that you're inspired by. But
Hmm.
when you go to do your work, it's a combination of all those influences and then your own personality and your own take on it.
Yes, absolutely. You're so right, and we are a combination of all the things, like you said, right? What we absorbed around in our entire life growing up.
Now, one thing I'm going to ask you about, because this is something somebody asked me and I was kind of like really kind of taken aback, is AI is starting to get into creativity. And there
Yes.
are people saying that they want to have AI music producers, AI artists, AI podcast hosts, taking AI programmers taking over like human being roles. So that in the future, you could have like, a music artist that's all AI.
Yeah.
You know, your producer's AI, your engineer's AI. It's like, well, where are the people?
Hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So AI, it's artificial intelligence, and for it to become intelligent, it has to learn from other influences. Just like we are influenced from all the things that we've learned over the years, AI also has to learn from what's already present and published. So the more content is published by you in any space, photography, videography, film, music, text, that's the content that artificial intelligence is using to create the new stuff. Now, there's a lot of AI, happening where we've been hearing about OpenAI for a while. ChatGPT just got really popular since it launched in November of 2022. But prior to that, OpenAI has been around for about since 2015. And if you think about it, Google and Facebook and Twitter and all these algorithms are literally learning from human beings as they create content. When you like a content, it's telling AI, hey, this is the type of content people like. So it's
Hmm.
storing all of that data and then feeding it back to you. So the beautiful thing is somebody still has to train this content. Somebody still has to train the AI. So we still need musicians. We still need original creators to be able to train the AI of the future, right? So
That's a,
what?
that's a good take on it. I was hearing
Absolutely.
a different point of view where that some kind of modern nefarious in the future like executives say, I got a roster of like 1,000 musicians. I'm going to drop it down to the top 50, and
Yeah.
everything should be AI, and I'll lose 950 musicians and go with 50 of the cream of the crop, and then
Right.
drop everybody else and just use AI for everything else.
Right.
So that's kind of like the fear in among the musicians that that's the way they're going to go. That they're going to go
I
and
mean,
like drop tons of people and then do that.
it can go any which way, right? And that's why I recommend everybody to build your own email list, build your own course, build your own monetization product so you're not dependent on the masses to buy your stuff. You build
Mm.
your own following. I mean, look at Grateful Dead,
Yeah, yeah,
right? It
yeah.
is
That's
a
the way to do it.
community that is not popularized. I didn't even know about Grateful Dead till I read the book by Seth Godin called "This Is Marketing." He
Mm.
create they created this community that no matter where they go, they're gonna come and support. So
Yeah,
as creators, we need to create our own following, our own groups and vibe and have supporters. AI is gonna come and AI is gonna go, but where we are going and where we won't. What'll essentially happen is now, if you look at where the social media is at, right? 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, there was no concept of a social media manager or
oh
somebody who
yeah,
manages
brand
this or
yeah.
that, right? So job titles will change. There's going to be new job titles coming in the view. So what we want to do, what we want to be able to do is accept what's happening and be in the forefront of training the technology that is going to take over. So instead of saying, oh, this is bad, say,
Mhm.
okay, how can I use this in my current process, and how can I train it so that not only am I doing my work faster, but how can I also, guide it to the way where we're being really smart about it? Because human beings, we have intelligence that's much more like it's incomprehensible by OpenAI.
Yeah.
Sure,
I
it's really
mean,
fast, but it's very still simplified. We can bring in so much more
yeah.
personality to what they're outputting.
That's why I was explaining to somebody that I felt musicians are always going to have a place because I always have this comparison. Like you got
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix play Voodoo Child.
Mm-hmm.
Hendrix wrote Voodoo Child, right? With his cosmic psychedelic heavy metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's blues based. But Stevie Ray Vaughan covered it and almost matches Hendrix, but he didn't do it the same way. He does it from a
Mm,
Texas blues man perspective. Both versions of it can stand alone. On the
yes.
surface, they might sound the same, but when you detail it, analyze
Mm-hmm.
it, Hendrix is more loose. It's more kind of wild, where the
Yeah.
Texas blues is more restrained. The drumming's more time
Mm-hmm.
based, and his style is more reserved. But he still can
Yeah.
channel and kind of feel. But Hendrix was the master, and he did it a different way. The thing
Mm-hmm.
about that shows is like in music, you can do the same song, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're a musician, you can interpret it very differently.
So much
The
differently.
difference,
Yeah.
if you think like a modern DJ, though, they're
Mm-hmm.
taking clips of what has already been done.
Yes.
The Hendrix comparison with Stevie Ray Vaughan, those are two musicians actually showing their art of being a
Yes.
musician, what it takes to be a musician. So I think like the AI can go and be like a DJ, but I doubt
Yes.
it could ever channel a Hendrix or a Stevie Ray Vaughan because that's a inherently human
It is.
capability that a musician can kind of do.
And then it also comes down to who is controlling the AI, right? So the person writing the prompts for the AI also has to be smart enough and think in those terminology. For example, if you wrote a prompt to say OpenAI to do something, would be totally different level than what I would write. So I can do simple things like, oh, write an article on this topic in the style of Shakespeare. So now it comes back with Shakespearean style of that content, but you can add even more character to it because of the knowledge that you have from that music perspective.
Yeah, so I still think humans are going to have a big place in
Oh,
creativity
absolutely.
always. And the one thing where AI I do embrace in some modern synthesizer technology,
Mm-hmm.
Roland has built this thing called an intelligent arpeggiator.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like a Casio chord. It actually watches what the musician plays on
Nice.
the instrument and then provides drums and backing instruments that that basically are following what you're playing as you do it. So it
Wow.
never does the same thing. So like when you
Mm,
go, so it's a very cool tool when you're like a single musician and you don't have your band and you want to try something out. You can go and start playing and it'll introduce a bass line and the bass line is following what you're
mm,
doing in real time. And the
that's
drummer's
beautiful.
following what, so that's a very cool use of it
Yeah.
because you're still doing your line. You're
Mm-hmm.
maybe playing piano or you're playing pads and the other things are coming in and then he lets you go in and change it.
It
So
becomes a supporting agent.
it becomes a supporting agent so
Mm,
artists can suddenly, I don't have to wait for the rest of the band. I can actually
right.
start writing whenever I want. It's 2 in the morning. I don't got to go call them up. I can
Exactly.
still go write it.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love
So
that.
yeah, I think that's a cool thing. And do they have tools like that for video processing where AI will
They
come
do.
in,
I mean,
give you like different backgrounds or effects that maybe you wouldn't have thought of?
yeah. So some of the AI that Adobe's already using on their platform is, for example, in After Effects, if you've shot a video and you remove, let's say, something that's not clean, and like, hey, I want to remove this car driving my shot, and it takes care of it for you. So, AI is doing some of that. And what's funny is that going back I think almost 6, 7 years, Adobe's been doing that in their Photoshop where they're content aware. They're looking at the content and you're content aware, remove or fill in a spot in your photo. So AI has been around with us for a while, and it's just going to get better and better over time. The question is, how soon are you going to embrace it and start using it in your tools and in your real
Yeah.
work?
I think it's like anything. It's like, people say, "Oh, Keith, you're an analog guy, so you don't like digital." It's like, no. The way I look at it is like a song, right? Is my little baby, my kid, and
Yeah,
however it comes to life, whatever serves the song. So if I want to do it totally on acoustic instruments, then I choose to do it. If I want to use a sampler on one track because I want to, because it's the vibe I want. So I'll use acoustic and digital and sampling and anything because the way I
yeah,
look at it is like whatever serves the song, right? Each song is
absolutely.
different. So however it comes to be. So I think as an artist is like we use tools that are going to serve what we our direction, right? So
100%.
in some cases you might not want AI, but
Yeah,
that doesn't mean you won't ever use it. It's just that this particular thing I don't want it, right? But this
exactly.
other thing I do, and so I think you have to be willing to not have such narrow lanes, to be
Agreed.
more open to all kinds of things, and then you can move forward in any way.
Yes, 100%. Man, that was an awesome question. I love it.
So for your future home studio mastery, what do you have like coming up for people who come to your website? There's certain like things that you have planned for 2023.
So 2023, we're working on a 5-day challenge, which is coming up February 6th. The details will be available. We'll post it on the website as soon as they're available. But it's going to be a 5-day challenge. We're going to work with people to walk them through. Hey, this is what it takes to set up your studio, and these are the actions you could do and to look better on camera because we are all creating video content day in day out.
Well, I think we can. I know you have to go somewhere right now, so I think we can kind of break it at that. I just wanted to give people a heads up for 2023. I think we'd have a really good conversation, and I
Thank
do
you, man.
encourage everybody to go to the website, homestudiomastery.com. That will be clickable when we publish. And I thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a really good conversation. I think a lot of people can learn from what we've talked about.
Thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too.